Hi friends, and welcome to February. So this month I selected knitting as the base for what we're going to do and continue our work on thinking about self-care, self-worth, and why knitting though? Because I feel like since we've been focusing a lot on sewing, and I know it's sew and let go, but at the same time it's fiber arts, and I was guessing that knitting might be new to some of you who have been subscribing and following, and that's the whole point really, is trying something different. Even if you are a knitter and you use needles, this might be an opportunity for you to try something different, because we're going to primarily focus on finger knitting, maybe do some arm knitting later in the month, but we're going to focus initially on finger knitting because I think that whenever you start something, you should start simply. All you're going to need is some yarn, and we're going to start with some chunky because being a learner, we're going to have to focus, we're going to have to think through, and I want to try to minimize some frustration, and so we want to have some quick success so that we can stay motivated to keep doing that. So why learn something new? How does that, I don't have time already with the things that I do know how to do and enjoy. Why would I start something new? It's a stressful time right now. Why would I want to put myself through becoming a learner? Well, because when you are a learner, you do hyper focus, and that's freeing in a bit. You get into a bit of a flow, even if something is frustrating. Actually, that's part of the point of the whole exercise, is we need to continuously put ourselves in the place of being a learner, because it's practicing doing things that are hard and getting through it. It actually builds up our resilience, our ability to be resilient. And it doesn't have to be really big. Actually, it's better if you start really small. What are some little things that you could try? So we're going to do that with knitting. I recently learned watercolor, and it is something that was completely new to me. I've always wanted to learn how to paint in some way, and I found it amazing and frustrating and all-consuming in some ways and exciting, and I am new. And one of the main benefits that I also think is really important for putting ourselves in the space of a learner is it does shift our perspective. When we learn something new and we really fully immerse ourselves into that, that exciting feeling of trying something new, and you get, then you see it everywhere, and then you Google it, and then you look at the supplies, and suddenly there's a whole new community that you can be a part of, because now you have access, because you are watercolor artist, you're a knitter, you like to sew, and so it builds that community, but it also taps into a little bit of that flow and that change of perspective. So I will say I'm not great at drawing. So whenever I'm watercoloring, it's something that I've traced. And when I'm out in nature though, when I'm walking my dog, it really has shifted my perspective. And that's what I'm hoping this process of trying something new this month and putting ourselves in the place of the learner is really going to do that. And of course I have some beautiful poetry and some readings and some things for you to think about. And if this just isn't your thing and you don't have yarn, that's totally fine. You just pick up your slow stitching and you stitch along with me, and we'll kind of listen and comment about any of the things that I'm putting out there. So otherwise, take a chance with me, learn something new, and next month we'll get back into sewing. Right then, so let's get started now that you know the intention for February, and we're going to do some knitting. We're going to do some finger knitting. If we have time, if there's some interest, I can show you a type of knitting that I learned to do that's not continental or English. It's actually called Portuguese, and it really helps because I have carpal tunnel, and it helps keep that going. So let's get into the logistical piece of how do we go about finger knitting. Let me show you my yarn that I'm going to use, and this is Lion Brand, and I believe I got this actually at a Joann's store, but it's Wool Ease Thick and Quick. Again, I don't often use this. I prefer more fingering weight actually. I started out kind of with some lace, and so this is actually kind of fun. I've already been practicing. And speaking of that, I want to show you, this is a little bit about what we're going to work towards. So this is kind of like a cording, and in my mind it kind of almost looks like an I-cord, like an edging, but it's nice. It's definitely three-dimensional. It almost is kind of prism-like in a way. It has 4 sides, and it's nice and long. It's not necessarily a tube. At some point we'll talk about different things that we can make. I think for this one I'm gonna maybe make it into a round or an oval rug, because I'll wrap it around. So I'll come back to this and show you when you get to a stopping place how you can kind of go about that. So again, finger knitting is something that I encountered whenever I was a teacher of about 2nd and 3rd grade, and I taught a class called Practical Arts to my classroom. Really, we just had a time for that, and we learned some knitting, and I'll show you, and then I'll tell you kind of the story about what happened after I taught it to those kiddos. So, as an elementary teacher, I would say, let's put the tail back here, hold it so it doesn't get away, and then we're going to put it between our index and middle finger, and then we're going to come around. I would tell them kind of like around the tree and then back. So it looks like that. Let me try it. Let me show you again, and then I'll flip my hand over, because that's where we're going to work. So I like to start palm up. I think you could start this a variety of ways this way, but it makes best sense to me, and I'll show you in a bit why. So, and you don't need a lot of tail. You're just going to have that to tug on. So then you bring the yarn between your fingers, back forward. So you're basically wrapping around that middle finger. And then it's coming back around that index. And then you flip it over. For now, the tail can just hang out right there. And so when we're going to work, we're just going to wrap toward us. If you can see, we're going to take, I always like to start with the first one because it's hardest on the index finger. And then I also just put some lotion on. Probably can see the shine to that. So we're constantly, this motion, this is the repetitive motion, taking the loop that's right closest to our knuckles, bringing it up and over that loop that we made at the end, and then pulling the tail. And so the first time it's most satisfying because, see, that tail actually gets quite long. And so we don't want to get this really tight. So right now that's about as tight as I want that. It's okay to be a little loose. Right now we're just kind of learning, and we're in that stage of learning. So I'm going to push those down just a little bit so that they stay on. And again, the repetitive motion is wrapping toward you. So you're going to keep taking it off. Sometimes it slides forward. I'm a little bit out of practice, but you will get faster. And after you do that, tugging every time, sliding them off, round towards you, taking it off. So it's important to put ourselves back in the beginners as a learner, especially as teachers. I think quickly we can get used to what our students know and kind of begin to take that for granted. And then when we kind of enter into some things, sometimes and the more experience we have, our expectations might be that students can move even more fast than we can, and so sometimes we forget how long, how much time and space it takes to learn and being a learner, and how much we benefit from repeating the same initial acts as we're learning over and over again, so we can build up our confidence And that's one of the reasons why, as I said, I wanted to do knitting for February. Build up our confidence, put us back into that space. When you're learning, sometimes you have to really, really focus. You're getting it right. You're watching the video, trying to get the loops and that, so you can see it's already coming over and over again. So that's how it is. I'm going to pause there. We'll come back on Wednesday and work with this just a little bit, but it's really fun. I practiced so I would have a little bit to show you, and then as I was going to stop and I was going to use the other end of the yarn, so this is from the same ball, it's just different sides. I quickly just grabbed one of these stenciling paintbrushes that I kind of had, and I just kind of shoved it in there. So basically that's what you can do if you want to keep working on this, but yet you have to pause, or you got something on the stove and you need to check in it, or in the oven, or a million other things that call you away. You can just find anything, pencil, whatever, and all you need to do is slip it in those holes. Just, so this is terrible to pick because it's slippity, although I guess I could put this under there and clip it in. So now it's perfect. And then if I wanted to come back to this one, I can just, this is going to be this side, and then I'm just going to make sure that you don't twist it, and then just slide it back on. Actually, I'm not even sure it matters if you twist it. It won't be too noticeable. It might if I wasn't going to make something like a rug in there, or if I needed that space out, but I don't think it matters. So then I can just pick back up as I did before. And I said I would share a little bit of the story about whenever I did this with kids, and then I'll end for today on Monday. So I had a class of about 20 students that I co-taught because we had like a 1-to-12 ratio at that particular school. So there were 2 full-time teachers in the classroom, and we kind of split up our time a little bit. So I taught the practical arts part mostly by myself. So I came up with this, and the surprising part was, this knitting has this connotation of it's just for your grandma, and it might be for your grandma. My grandma did this, and I just have intense value for anything that you can do with your own hands, whether it's knitting, it's woodworking, it doesn't really matter. So I just have a value in it. Not everybody does. And sitting and working with your hands like this isn't something that you think that active boys traditionally like. But, those gender roles are changing all the time. And so I actually had a group of boys in that class that loved this, loved it more than any of the girls. And they would spend so much time, and they took balls of yarn home and would come back with their backpacks filled with just so much. It was almost a competitive nature at that point, like how long they could keep getting it, and then what could you do with it. And we kind of made jump ropes, or just like we talked about with the meditative stitching, you don't always have to have a project. It's really the process. And it was something that they went back to even later in life. I would hear from their parents. So middle school. So it is really soothing, especially for kids right now when anxiety is high. Doing something like this, having something that's almost fidgety, it's nice to have something to put your energies into and provide some time and space. And that's what my whole channel is about. It's really giving us time and space to think and sit with ourselves and be calm. So we'll end there. I'm going to take that off and put my paintbrush, back in there. When we come back on Wednesday, we'll pick it back up. And I encourage you to find your own ball of yarn. It doesn't have to be this size. It can be any size, and you do it the same way. And that's where we'll start.